Well, hello. I'd like to welcome you to the great state of Arizona, the city of Tucson, and most importantly, the Pima County. And in case you don't know it, this is one of our first YouTube interviews. I'm Darrell Bakeman, and I am delighted to be the one who gets to interview our recorder, Gabriela Cázeres-Kelly. Good evening, Gabriela.
Hi there.
You know, a lot of people know very little about you. Can you give us a brief overview about you, how you got to this office and when you came?
Sure thing. Since this is an introductory, I'll start off with a proper introduction. Skuktash, Anya Nyapchugi Gabriela Cáceres-Kelly, Bismo Ochkup Amjad, Anya Pima Chukshan Ohahandam. Hi, my name is Gabriela Cáceres-Kelly. I'm from the communities of Bismo and Coop, which are located on the Thon Nation, which is right here in beautiful Pima County, where I've been a lifelong resident, and I am now serving as your Pima County recorder. I was elected in 2000 and took office in 2021. My office oversees voter registration, early voting, and document recording for the county. We have around 624,000 registered voters here. And so I'm responsible for the data retention of all of those. And I entered this field kind of in a non-traditional way. I was an educator. I used to work at a tribal community college. And one day I volunteered to host a voter registration table. I thought it would be super easy to do. And as it turns out, it's not. It's not always super easy, especially for voters who live in tribal communities or rural communities. There's some additional things that people need to know about those voters. And it led me down a wormhole that I have fully, I fully
Great.
climbed in. And here we are a few years later.
You
Um,
mentioned some special things that people in rural and tribal areas have to do. This is not focusing on that, but why don't you enlighten us? Because sometimes people think registering to vote is easy. You only need ID.
Right. For people in communities like the Thon Nation, tribal community, reservation, there's a lot of times there are people who don't have driver's licenses. They're, the closest motor vehicle division is sometimes an hour, maybe 2 hours away. If your family only owns one vehicle or maybe doesn't own a vehicle, your motivation for getting a driver's license or a state ID is lessened. Um, there's also, depending on the community, some tribal communities that are located in rural areas don't have physical addresses. So an address like 7251 North Cactus Drive doesn't exist out there. And so people will more likely use a PO box number or a HCO1 box number. And when you ask for a physical address, you might get a confused look on someone's face because why would you need that? You have my PO box number. Of course, that information is required so that we can put you in the appropriate jurisdiction, and so that you're in the right precinct. And it helps determine who represents you. And so in those communities, we recommend that people put their place name. So for me, if I were registering in the community where I grew up, I would put Pisinimo Village in the Pisinimo district. And that is very easy to understand within my community. But again, it's difficult if you don't know and people are just like, what do I have to do to fill out this form? There's an area on the Arizona voter registration form that says if you live if you have a physical description, please draw a map. Well, the Thon Nation is the size of Connecticut. Most people have no idea it's there. And when you're talking about some of these rural communities, I literally cannot give you my address or directions without talking about dirt roads and take a left at the big tree. Those are literally my directions to get to my home where I grew up. And so, sometimes I get a little lost in the paperwork and people don't know how to fill that out on paper.
And people who are in positions like yours don't know how to ask the right questions.
That's often the case, but luckily, for those, I'm the first Native American to be elected to this position. I'm the first Native American to be elected in a countywide seat to begin with, and I'm only the third and fourth recorder or countywide elected in the state. And I bring with me that unique information of an understanding of that community. And so I speak the language of that community, not necessarily like the Thon language, but I speak the language that the community uses in English. And so being able to explain what I mean when I'm asking you in English how to fill out the form, makes a really big difference. And I was able to bring that here to the office and train my staff so that when somebody calls and says, I live in Hicquan District, they know what that means.
This was the best explanation I have ever heard of why we need diversity at the top levels of government. Thank you so much, Gabriela. That was a perfect explanation, and you're well suited for this position. Given all of that, and thank you for sharing the role of your office, there has been a lot of dialogue out here in our legislative district about purging that's happening with the voter rolls. Can you speak to that at all so that the people who are looking at this video will understand what is happening?
Absolutely. So it's very important to know that we're very careful about the use of the word purging. Purging is a scary sounding term. Many people think it's widespread and it's just happening willy-nilly. That is absolutely not the case. My office, the recorder's office, is responsible for the daily maintenance of voter rolls at 365 every single day of the year. We are doing voter maintenance. And that is because on any given day, we may have up to 500 people who move into the county, move out of the county, who've passed away, who've canceled their voter registration, who've updated an address, a name, a party. There's so many different things that people make daily changes on, maybe the way that they're going to receive a ballot. And so what happens with everything that we do in this office, everything is tied to an address. Again, I was talking about the importance of a physical address. And so what we do when somebody registers to vote, part of our check process to confirm that a person lives where they say they do is to send mail there. If that mail gets bounced back or if it's returned by the sender, we send a different type of mail. One to make sure that it is a piece of mail that is eligible to be forwarded to an address. So your ballot, for example, it cannot be forwarded and it would automatically be returned to us if it was undeliverable. But we can send just a first-class letter and have that letter be sent to you that says, hey, we tried to send you some mail and we got it bounced back. If we get that next piece of mail, which now means 2 pieces of mail, if they have been mailed back to us and we receive that here, we then start a clock for 35 days by federal law. If a voter does not respond within that time period, we then put them on, it is the National Voter Registration Act process, which means that that voter, after 35 days, if we have not heard back from them, if they haven't come in, they haven't called us, they haven't responded to our mail, they haven't emailed our office or anything, we just have no idea where this person lives, we put them in an inactive status. That means that if that person does walk in, we can say, hey, we've been looking for you. Well, let's update your voter registration because we're trying to send you mail and you're not getting it. And so something as simple as them calling, coming in to vote, they could even sign a petition if their name randomly gets selected for signature verification and we're showing that they're engaged somehow, we take them off that list. However, if after 2 federal cycles, which is a total of 4 years, if a voter has never contacted the office, they have never responded, we cannot send them mail, we have never confirmed that this person is in fact a voter, we then remove them from our voter rolls after 2 federal cycles. At
So,
any point, they
mhm.
can re-register, or they can update. And it's important to know that 2 federal cycles would include the midterm election and the presidential election. So after a presidential election year in 2025, you will see that number drop down again.
That's significant. So do you start with your existing roles to send out the communication to verify that they're still a voter? And in order to send out mail, do you start with what you have, or is there another procedure you use?
So there's a number of different things that we're doing. So number one, when the voter registers for the very first time, we send them their mail to confirm. We send them a voter ID card. We also, for those who are registered for the active early voting list, which is the mail voting list, we send them what we call a 90-day notice. And so we send them a notice 90 days before an election to let them know, hey, this election is coming. If you need to make any changes, let us know. And if we have any of those returned, that would put you on an inactive. The next would be a ballot. If we mail your ballot and a ballot comes back to us and it's not able to be forwarded, we definitely need to hear from that voter. And so it is any of those processes within a 4-year period, 2 federal election cycles. And so it's pretty significant for somebody to register and never make any additional contact for a very long time.
So this is important. What you're
Yes.
saying to someone who's listening to this, if you want to vote, you have to remain active on the roll. It rolls. It's your responsibility to communicate with the recorder's office first to make sure you are listed with your current address so that you can vote. And if we send you some mail, you must respond either by what we're asking you to do, by voting, by calling, by going online to let us know you still exist and live at the address so we can stay in communication with you. Because if you don't, you might end up not on the list and not being able to vote. So the message is voters have to remain engaged in the process, not just show up at the polls or expect the ballots coming through the mail. It's their responsibility to make sure that they're on the list. Is that correct?
Almost. We're almost correct there. If there is a person who chooses to register to vote, but never, they get their mail, but they never respond to it. They even get their ballot and maybe they never vote it. That person will still remain on the voter rolls because we have not received anything back. So
Ah.
that is the major difference. So it's only for people who are experiencing a situation where your mail will be returned to our office. A lot of times this happens accidentally when people go on vacation during an election. They expect their ballot to be forwarded. And like I said, by federal law, that is not possible. We cannot forward your mail to you. We cannot forward a ballot. The US Post Office cannot forward a ballot to you. However, you can call our office and you can say, I'm going to be in Ohio for a whole month and I need my ballot mailed to this address in Ohio, and we will gladly accommodate. This is the same for if there's somebody who's going on a cruise, or going to be somewhere, abroad. Maybe they're going to be on a fancy French vacation for a whole month and are going to miss those deadlines. We have options for those voters. We have military and overseas provisions so that as long as they're in contact with us, we can provide them the proper paperwork to get signed up, and we could actually email them a ballot or mail a ballot all the way to France. And so there's always an option, but if your mail is getting returned to us, that's when you're going to run into issues. And a lot of times that happens because people are going on vacation, or often because they maybe did a change of address form with the post office, thinking that that automatically came to our office, but it doesn't. We cannot make changes to your voter registration without your signature. We cannot make changes. Sometimes people have multiple properties. Sometimes
Yep. Mhm.
you have no idea what a voter is doing or where they're actually staying. And so we need them to initiate and update with us.
This is so important because I think some people think they're minions running around taking people off the voter rolls, and that's not happening. It's up to the voter to make sure that they can still vote. And if
Right.
you are on the active list or believe you're on that active send me a ballot list, how can you make sure that you're still on it? Just
Super easy.
yeah.
This is amazing. You can visit our website, recorder.pima.gov, and you can check your voter registration. You can do that. Any one of the 624,000 registered voters in Pima County, you are able to look that up. On there, you will see whether or not you are, number one, if you're registered. Number two, if you are signed up to vote in the active early voting list. Number three, you will see all of the different districts that you live in, so you can better understand who represents you and which districts you live in. And then the last thing, which is really neat, you can also see your voting history. And I want to be really clear, it doesn't mean who exactly you voted for, but what you can see is that you participated in an election, and it'll show you the way that you participated. So if you look at mine, you'll see literally 3 pages going back to the year 2000, where I first voted in my very first election. And you'll see that I voted at a polling location. And then as you look at the more recent, you'll see that I participate now by early voting sites. So all of that information is available. And the other thing I would strongly recommend is signing up for our text or email alerts. So when you come and check your voter registration, the same page that you sign in, you can then sign up to get email or text message alerts sent directly to your phone. We will send you a text message when, as we're preparing your ballot, when it's mailed out, when we've received it back, when it's been signature verified, and then finally, when it's been turned over to the elections department for tabulation. It's fabulous. We love it. And we are encouraging more and more people to sign up to receive those alerts.
And how do people sign up so we can I'll make sure we put it across the screen while we're saying it. So why don't you repeat that again?
So you can visit recorder.pima.gov, click on check your voter registration, or if you have a hard time with our website, or you're just, no, that's too much work, you can just give us a call at 520-724-4330, and one of my very helpful staff members will make sure that you're signed up.
That's wonderful information to have. Thank you very much, Gabby. The other thing I want to talk about, because there are two more issues I want to cover before we end this call, and that is the locations for voting. Can you tell people what the options are for voting? We talked a little bit about mail, but let's talk about locations, because I was reading in the Tucson agenda today that there's some things that our legislators are trying to do. But first, I want to know what exists today, then we can talk about the things that people are talking about.
So each election is unique. It's very important to know that. We do our very best to try to have the same places over and over available to the public, but sometimes we really can't help it. Sometimes there's construction in one location, or there's a program that can't move. And so it's really important for you to look up your locations before you come visit. The worst thing is hearing frustrated voters going to the place that they always voted and finding out that's no longer a voting location. So my office, the Pima County Recorder's Office, is responsible for early voting. That means everything before election day. So the 27-day period, the day we mail out the ballots, all the way till the day before elections is my responsibility. And typically what we've had in the past is we've only had our main offices open. So that was only 3 locations open for a presidential preference election. I, however, am very committed to providing opportunities for people to participate in rural locations because I grew up rural. That is always close to my heart. My family lives rural. I want to make sure that we are present in the community. And so what we have done is we have expanded our early voting options during the presidential preference election. We went from 3 locations to now we have 10. And 10 of those locations, they are open for just a few days here or there. So you're really going to want to make sure that you check our website and look at voting sites to see what your closest location will be. And then on election day, the election day is facilitated completely by the elections department. And my office worked really closely with the elections department to provide electronic poll books, which now means that any voter in Pima County can vote at any location closest to their home, school, work, wherever they're planning for the day, shopping, wherever is most convenient for you to participate on election day, you can walk in there and no one is going to say you're in the wrong location. They are going to provide you with your ballot.
That's wonderful. So are these called polls still, or they have a different name now?
So they are called vote centers. And
Vote
on
center.
election day, so voting locations will be the recorder's office. We have early voting locations, and then the elections department has vote centers. But they essentially do the same thing. One unique thing to early voting is that because it is an extension of our office, the recorder's office, who is responsible for voter maintenance and roll maintenance, if you are experiencing an issue, if you've ever had an issue when voting, if somebody's ever told you you're not on a list or something like that, or maybe you've moved and you're not quite sure where to go, that is the best opportunity for you to not only go there and cast your ballot, but also make sure that your record is up to date. Our staff will personally take care of that and alert you of any things that you might be experiencing, such as maybe you were inactive and need to fill out a new voter registration form, or maybe we have a note on our records that say, your signature was questioned last time. Let's get a new signature. Because you're there in person, that's one of the benefits of coming to early voting.
So coming to early voting where they can tell us again where they can have that done in person one more time.
So there will be 10 locations and they are open various dates throughout the 27 days prior to election. And you can find that information on recorder.pima.gov and visit our site called Voting Sites.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's great.
I do have one other very important thing to share about the upcoming presidential preference election.
Okay.
Which is that the presidential preference election is a political party election that is facilitated by the counties. And what that means is the political parties get to decide who can participate and who cannot. And the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have both chosen to have elections, and only members of those registered parties will be able to participate. This is very different from every other election where independent or no party designated voters normally are able to simply walk in and ask for the ballot of the party that they would like to participate in. But for this election, if you are independent or no party designated, you will not be able to participate.
So
Uh,
let's be clear about this. We're talking about the PPE, the presidential preference election, which happens every 4 years, where you are not electing the president, you're electing delegates to go to the respective party conventions, who will then put the candidate that you voted for on, they will put those people, they will vote for those people at the convention. So that's what's the presidential preference. It's you're deciding which candidate you want to have presented at the convention by voting for those individuals who are on the ballot who will represent them. Am I speaking correctly?
that is accurate. Yes.
Okay. Now, the other thing that you're trying to tell us, which is critical, this is a state that's a third, I heard.
Yes,
And
it
so
is.
if you are not a registered Democrat or Republican right now, because those are the only two that have presented the appropriate paperwork that's telling your office that they are going to be on the ballot on the presidential preference election date, which is March 19th, correct?
Tuesday, March 19th, coming
That's
up.
right. So it's coming up very, very soon. So what has to happen is if someone else, some other party decides they want to be represented, they would have to get their paperwork to whom and by when?
Well, the deadline for them to request actually what happened this cycle is the other parties, other political parties chose not to have a presidential preference election. But if you are an independent or no party designated voter, or maybe you belong to a party that is not having a presidential preference election and you want to participate in either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party's presidential preference election, you must register to vote by February 20th, 2024 by midnight.
So if you're currently listed as for a party other than Democrat or Republican, you have to re-register for that particular party that you want to vote for on the 19th of March, correct?
On February, you have to do it
You
by
have to
February
register by
20th.
the 20th in order to vote on the 19th.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's important. And plus, you gave us some news. You told us that there is no other party listed for the presidential preference other than Democrats and Republicans. No independents are listed. No Green Party is listed, just Democrats or Republicans. So if
Right.
you'd like to vote on the 19th of March, you have to go and register for one of those two parties by the 20th of February, correct?
Right. There are only five recognized political parties in the state of Arizona: the Democratic, the Republican, the Libertarian, the No Labels Party, and most recently, the Green Party has just gotten ballot status again. Any other party, so when people say independent, there is no independent party, although most people write that in. Um, if the independent party decided to organize and they collected signatures, and they were able to meet that requirement, just like the Green Party did, we would then have an independent party. But as of right now, anybody who is in that third bucket is just considered no party designated.
Thank you very much for that information. That's news we can use, Gabrielle. I like that. Thank you so much for that. You have cleared up a lot of information for us. You know, it's amazing how many things get out there that are not true. And especially in the age of all of the ability to be able to communicate on your phone and in other ways to other people, and people don't always know the facts. So when we have a fact producer telling us what the facts are, it's really important to be able to glean the information so you know what to do. I have another thing that I want to ask you. I've been, like I said, today on Tucson Agenda, there was some information about something that our senator from LD17 was doing, presenting a Senate Bill 1286 that has something to do that's happening right now. Are you familiar with that?
I don't know which one.
Okay, this
Um,
is where Justine Wazak is supposed to be in a hearing today. And basically, she is wanting to prohibit these voting centers that you were just telling us about. And instead, she wants to open up the schools so that people can go to the gym and vote. Are you familiar with that?
I am not I'm not aware of this particular piece of legislation
Okay.
because there's maybe 5 of these. And last cycle there was 5 of them and there was 5 the cycle before. One of the most recent bills that I heard was trying to limit precinct uh go from vote centers to precinct based um, uh, polling sites, but would cap them at 1,000 people per precinct,
I see.
which would, if we have 624,000 registered voters,
Oh my
we would
goodness.
be talking about
Crazy. Mm.
624 different locations and more in places where there was more population. Currently, the elections department hosts 130. So imagine having to quintuple that number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about the storage space, the amount of people
Yeah.
that you would have to employ,
Mhm.
the insane amount of cost associated with that. And it doesn't provide any more meaningful um, access to people. That isn't a good use of taxpayer dollars. So it's really not thought out well.
I was going to say,
Um,
this is why you have to be careful who you vote for. You can't send people to the House and the Senate who come up with wild schemes and don't have any facts to base it on.
no.
So, given all of
And in addition to that, the recorders and the elections directors, we've had multiple conversations about whether or not we should require schools to be voting locations.
this,
And because we don't have a national holiday, it's a school day.
yeah,
It's a day where you have children on the premises, and then you have strangers able to walk in
yeah,
and out
that's
of
right.
campus unchecked without having to sign in or to know where they're wandering on your campus. As a former educator,
Yeah,
that's a serious concern for me. And then also just recognizing that a lot of these locations are not as accessible as one would hope, especially for the elderly. Like
yeah,
a lot of these locations are designed for young children or athletes and their gyms. And maybe they are all ADA compliant, but that ADA compliance means having to take an extra ramp around
yeah,
the building
yeah.
and an extra entrance. Those kinds of things are not helpful for voters. And so there's some really huge issues that people take with that because we are relying on the different locations to host us throughout the county and what our community needs. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank
taking
you
up
so much
space
for
and
explaining
underfunded
that
schools.
so succinctly and thoroughly. The other issue that's out here is the issue related to the low voter threshold and changing the dates of things. So I wanted you to speak to that before we talk about the dates people need to
Yes,
remember.
so I have been very opposed to, so what's happening is in the 2022 legislature, they changed the recount margins, so that it would trigger a recount at a much smaller number and or a much larger number, which means that we're going to have a lot of them. And this was a decision made by the state legislature without consultation of the elections directors who actually tabulate ballots.
Mhm.
And so they pushed through, even though they were warned that there was going to be timing issues relating to the elections. And so they have been, the elections directors have been very vocal about there being an issue, and they've been really asking for legislative help to make a change. There were 15 solutions presented. I would say 12 of them were pretty doable, and most recorders and elections directors supported both. And then there was a couple that recorders were not 100% on. Me and another recorder being two of the most vocal about this. One had to do with the change in cure deadline. So a cure deadline, we have, depending on the election, between 5 or 10 days, depending on the election type, to call voters to ask them about their signatures if we have a questionable signature. If we're not able to clearly determine whether somebody signed that ballot affidavit, we have to call them. We have to say, did you intend to submit this ballot? Was there a reason why your signature doesn't match? And sometimes it's something like, oh, I broke my hand.
Yeah.
And there's reasons that we have questions. And so currently we have 5 business days to be able to call the voters and connect with them, and they can connect back and determine whether or not it was them who submitted this ballot. The legislature wants to change it from business days to calendar days, which would mean that the calendar day, the end of that deadline, would fall on a Sunday.
Mhm.
Which most people aren't checking their email, they're
Mhm.
not answering phone calls.
Mhm.
They're less in rural and tribal locations, they're less likely to have connectivity outside of those public spaces or workspaces, places where there's unreliable internet. And so I have been opposed for that reason. The other thing that they tried to add in was the codification of a signature verification guidebook, which would basically mean that they're taking a guidebook that's a best practice and they're making it into law. And we think that that will result in literally people coming to our offices, observing our process and saying, you're doing that wrong, that signature needs to be invalidated,
Mhm.
which would mean litigation and delays in
And
our work.
cost.
So it would actually
Mhm.
extend the time.
Mhm.
And so the moving of a primary election date, I'm mildly opposed to it, only because if they were to do it by next week, we would have enough time to alert the public of that. But the longer they take, the less supportive I am of it.
Mhm.
And we've also printed out a lot of materials, and we've
It'll
done
be
a lot of
costly.
outreach,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the outreach doesn't stop. And so I need the legislature to make a decision, but it should only be about those timeline issues
Yeah.
and not about different processes that they just want to change because they can change them.
I
Uh,
was under the impression they had until Friday to make up this decision. Is that true or is it not true?
they voted on something today,
Okay.
and it isn't, um, it included some of those provisions that myself and some of the other recorders and the governor and the Secretary of State's office did not agree with. So
And it has to be signed by the governor to be approved?
it does, and it
Oh, okay.
also needs to have an emergency clause if it's going to be enacted before the primary election. Otherwise, it wouldn't go into law. It wouldn't go into effect until next until I think it's 90 days after the close of the session, which
Mhm.
who knows when that'll be.
Well, I'm really delighted to know that there's some hitches in the glitches in the flies in the ointment so that you can do the work that you've already set up to do for this election year. So why don't we talk about some of those dates so that the people who are listening will have them etched in their mind so they can put them on their calendars.
Yes, sure. So we're already in an active election for the presidential preference election. We mailed out our military and overseas ballots already. The last day to register to vote for the presidential preference election or make any changes to your record is February 20th by midnight or 11:59 p.m. Early voting will begin the very next day, which is February 21st. And you will have until Tuesday, March 19th to either vote or return your ballot. And we must have that within our possession for that to count.
Okay, good. That's important. Presidential
Yeah.
preference for Democrats and Republicans. That's the 19th of March. And if you want to register, if you're currently an independent or a part of another party and you want to vote on the 19th, you need to go and change your registration by the 20th of February.
Perfect.
Okay, how about, is there another election coming up people need to know about?
So we have a total of 3 this year. So the
Okay.
very first again was the presidential preference election happening March 19th. The following election will be the primary election, which is August 6th. August 6th is what we will then have. Let's say, for example, you have 5 Democrats running for one position. What this election does is it narrows it down to just one. And if the Republicans have 3 candidates running for that same position, they narrow it down to one. And what'll happen in the general election is they go toe to toe with any other parties that have candidates, and that will be in November. On November 5th, we will have the general election. So
So the Arizona primary election is the 6th of August. The general election that does both the Arizona election and also the presidential election will all occur on Tuesday, November the 5th. Did I
yeah,
say that correctly?
that is absolutely correct.
You're going to be very busy, Gabby.
We're a little bit busy. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you taking time. I'm representing LD17. We're very active and engaged. Is there anything that we can do to assist voters in this process? Do you want to leave us with any words of wisdom before we close our interview today?
Absolutely. What you can do is help people better understand these dates and these deadlines. Make sure that you're checking in, especially with your family unit. I can't tell you how often I'm getting a last minute text message from my father-in-law or my nephew asking me information relevant to whatever election day we're closest to. Please make sure that you're directing them to our website and to our office. We're spending a lot of time making sure that the information that's housed on our website is as clear and accessible as possible so that people can understand it in plain language. We are making a very concerted effort to put this information out there and make it so easily available. Please help us share that. Please help
Yeah.
us establish ourselves as the authority and the truth tellers of Pima County, because this is the source that you want to be able to come to and rely on and make sure that you have the most accurate information relevant to your community.
Well, one thing for sure is you're an excellent truth teller, and we really value having someone with your expertise, knowledge, and commitment as our Pima County recorder. It has really been delightful to spend time with you and to listen about the work that you're doing and for you to share your knowledge and your experience with us. It's just invaluable. Thank you so much, Gabby.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.